you will be sacrificing enjoyment and balance. So just know that you aren't going to be having a whole lot of fun. Boss bitch. Boss bitch. Okay, today we're going to talk about 10 reasons that are dumb that people do bodybuilding shows. Okay. And this is like half being a smartass, a little facetious, but also being real with you and sharing some stories, not only of my own, but of women that I've worked with and clients in the past. So the reason why I felt this was important is because we're in like the height of the competition season right now. At the time of this recording, I'm going to have 8 athletes here locally. I have another one in another state, and then people are ramping up to compete left and right. And so the buzz is going on around our studio right now. We're talking heavily about competition. My girls are in peak week. So it's like a hot topic, right? Not to mention, spoiler alert, we will be opening up space on the Goddess Body Elite team very soon. So check the show notes. There is going to be a link there for you to get on the wait list. So that way you will be notified, and we are going to have an interview process. So anyways, if you're interested, listen to this first, because after you listen to this, you might not be interested. And I'm actually typically in the business of talking people out of competing before I'm talking them into it. And it's not because I don't want to coach them or I don't think, that they can do it. It's more or less that I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the athlete side, the coach side, everything in between, coaching my daughter, coaching my best friend, and watching very, very closely people's lives as they go through this process, and of course my own as well. So I like to make sure that people are very well prepared with the do's, the don'ts, and the possibilities that might happen as they go through a contest prep or embark on that journey for bodybuilding to get on stage. Okay. Now, you know that I am an IFBB pro. I've done 16 shows. I don't think I need to keep reiterating that, but I might have some new friends here. Hello, welcome to Boss Bitch. So I do have that experience for my own experience. I do also have a couple IFBB pros that I'm coaching on my team. And I have, a robust amount of online clients, and have coached hundreds and thousands at this point in the studio of women in the past 16 years. So I have, some experience, if you want to call it that. So one of the things that I see happen is that a lot of people want to chase bodybuilding, or competing, I should say. Let me just use that. We're going to rephrase this. Competing as a standard to which they should be trying to achieve. And a lot of times, so this is dumb reason number 1, is chasing this unrealistic standard of beauty or fitness or health or whatever. Okay. Bodybuilding shows, competitions are not healthy. Okay. So oftentimes I will get people that will submit a physique assessment, which is the first step in essentially applying to be on the team. And they will submit a physique assessment, and this is just where you're going to upload some photos, and I give you a rundown of what I think that would look like for you in terms of time, which category, do you need to build more muscle, what you're doing currently, how would that fit in terms with what your goal is. And I see these women that are interested in competing, and some of them have a considerable amount of body fat to lose. And that's great. That's fantastic. And I think setting a goal to get to a healthy level of body fat is wonderful. I don't think something like just saying, I want to compete in a bodybuilding show is necessarily something that you should lead with if you have not been in the gym, already lifting weights consistently for quite some time, and assume that that's going to be an easy thing to undertake, right? Bodybuilding shows I take them very seriously because obviously I'm an IFBB pro. I got my pro card. I'm coaching women, and I don't like to just put athletes on stage just to put athletes on stage. And so for me, it's more of, are we on track to look the part? how far are we off from potentially being on stage at this point? Like, how much body fat do you have to lose? How long is your training history? So I consider a lot of things. But one thing I see time and time again is like, I would love this like bucket list goal of getting on stage and seeing my abs. It's so I laugh at this, and I'm not laughing at you, because I used to be this person who thought that like I just wanted to compete so I could have abs, because I could never see my abs ever, right? Like growing up, high school, after I had my babies, forget it. Well into my 20s, after I had my kids, and I was still like I was a really low body weight, but I wasn't doing things in the appropriate manner for me to be able to see my abs. And also, I wasn't going to see them, because I then have learned and have come to find out that you kind of have to be hungry, like really fucking hungry and almost starving to see your abs. Well, not everybody. Some are very, very genetically blessed and, have leaner midsections than others. But that is a very rare case. So if that is you, just know that there aren't many of y'all unicorns walking around. Okay. So chasing this unrealistic standard of like, I want a six pack, I want abs, and so I'm going to do a show, is more than likely you're going to end up quitting at some point. That's not like an anchor goal. That's not like an anchor reason to do the damn thing. Okay. I want to give you some tactical things to consider is, it's okay to want that. It's not wrong to want that. I'm not trying to diminish anybody's desires or wants, but the reality of it is that it's very short-lived. So meaning when these women get on stage, right, they're peaking for this one very moment in time, which is when their heel hits the stage and they're in front of the judges. So, as a coach right now, I'm coaching women in what is called peak week, which is the week before the show, which is refining all of the little things, the intricacies of their prep, and bringing it down so that way the moment they step on stage, they are at their absolute peaked conditioning, muscle fullness, beauty, everything from head to toe. So know that like that's what they're doing. It's for that one moment in time. Okay. The second dumb reason to try to do a bodybuilding show is that you're trying to seek some kind of external validation. Okay. So I will say that there has been, this is an easy trap to fall into, I feel like, for some people, because there has been times when I've done a show, I can't tell you, I've probably done at least 2 or 3 shows based off of the feeling of being pressured, because this is just who I am, right? Like I own a business, and I'm a coach, and I have these athletes, and I have a team, and I've competed and all the things. And I felt like I had to keep doing it to be validated by like my peers and my community for being like the girl that's always fit. And, she's doing these things. And so I put this like kind of self-imposed pressure on myself, but I see other women do this all the time, is that they want that external validation. It's not healthy to be doing anything just for the sheer validation of others. So knowing your self-worth, knowing this was something that took me some time to as well, to kind of sit back and say like, okay, I bring value to the world. I have a lot of experience. I've worked with a lot of women. I generally want everybody to know that like this is a totally different beast than just traditional fat loss. And that's generally like my mission with the podcast. It's like, I love y'all competitors and I love y'all athletes, because I'm your girl. Like I'm that girl too. We're homies. You're my bitches. But also I want you to know that outside of your bodybuilding identity, you are worthy outside of that. You are not just Diane Flores, IFBB pro, and you're only worthy if you're competing, right? And I think this is a story that we tell ourselves often when we compete and we do well, and then we get the bug and we want to do another show. And we're constantly chasing that external validation, like, oh, posting on Instagram, how many likes am I getting? How many people are congratulating me? And, how many people are sharing my posts and stuff like that. And so as wonderful as it is, and I think it's great, and I think you should share your journey, and, it inspires others, even if not to just get healthy and take care of themselves, is to be very discerning with your your mental energy, okay? And knowing that while that's all great and fine, that is a social media world, and that does not that is not, you don't need that validation for your self-worth, right? And it comes from being, practicing confidence, that confidence muscle, and being confident in other areas of your life, and not feeling like your only value is if you win shows or if you're competing. Okay, fun story for you. One example of when I should not have competed, but I did anyways, is, I don't know if y'all remember, for those of you that are longtime Boss Bitch fans, but your girl got COVID in the middle of prep for my pro debut. So I already had my pro card, but I was in the middle of a prep for Legion Sports Fest to do my pro debut. Ended up in the hospital with COVID. I think I was there 4 days. I had COVID pneumonia. And it kicked my ass. Clearly, I'm in the hospital, right? Like, it wasn't like some little, like the sniffle. And they pumped me full of the antibiotic stuff that they were using, or the antiviral, whatever. At the time, I came out, I had a rash all over my body. I started losing massive amounts of hair, and I decided to keep pushing. I was 9 weeks out from a show. I was nowhere near, definitely not 9 weeks out. Like, my body was not 9 weeks out before I got COVID, because I was kind of screwing around a little bit, like like my leptin levels were still a hot mess. So I was still having episodes of like snack accidents and not being able to control my food and things like that. So I was probably more like 13 or 14 weeks out, if I'm being honest, in terms of what my body looked like, but I was 9 weeks out. So we had to make some magic happen. It was awful. I would not recommend it to anybody. I was on like 900 to 1100 calories, just kind of depending on the day. I was doing, well over an hour and a half of cardio. I was training, and I was running my business, running the podcast, and trying to have somewhat of a personal life, which really, let's just be real, wasn't anything really at the time. So that was not a good idea. And I was doing it sheerly because I had already said on social media, hey, I'm doing this show. This is my pro debut. Like, y'all would have been fine if I said like, yo, I got COVID and I was in the hospital for 4 days. Like, no one's going to come after me like, hey, you didn't do that show you said you were going to do. But I value being a person of my word and like of integrity. And if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, unless something extenuating happens, like COVID, right? You would think. But even that, I was like, fuck that. I'm going to show people that like you can do it. And I paid the price for that prep for probably a year afterwards. And in the sense of like my hormones were a wreck. My eating took over a year to like recalibrate. My mood, my hair loss and stuff from COVID, after a show, after a pro debut, and I was on probably the most PED compounds I'd ever been on in my entire competitive career. So coming off of all that stuff, there is so much going on with your body. I should not have done that. Okay. And I was doing it purely because of external validation of like, oh yeah, oh my gosh, you're a badass. You did this thing after COVID. Like, please don't do that. Okay. I'm telling you, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. For a year, I fucking suffered coming out of that. So that would be number 2. Number 3 is really like competing for the wrong reasons, which is really a lot of everything I'm talking about anyways, which is like just doing a show to like outdo somebody or prove something, or like a revenge on a boyfriend. Think of competing is more for like personal growth, right? Personal growth and self-improvement. And what I mean by that is bodybuilding and competing has taught me so much and has made me into such a productive person, and has taught me how to prioritize things, and also like the importance of self-care, which I think gets neglected a lot of times as we become moms and partners and things like that a lot of times our own self-care goes to the back burner. And I think that bodybuilding and competing forces you to be so self-centered, right? Like, you are the focus of this entire process. This isn't for this isn't your kids' thing. This isn't your partner's thing. This isn't your boss's thing or your sister's or your friends. This is all bets on you. And the amount of discipline that you have to have is incredible. Like, it's a level of discipline that I have never had to have had to wield in my entire life. Okay. So people are thinking like, a lot of times people come to me and they want to compete, right? And I do a physique assessment, and I really, really go through a lot of this stuff that I talk about in the podcast here. So if you have a physique assessment, you're probably like, oh, a lot of this sounds familiar. Like if you had a physique assessment with me, where I try to really paint a picture of like how long it's going to take you in terms of like weeks and things like that, but also realistically, because a lot of people think that they eat well, like, oh, I eat healthy, I eat clean, I eat chicken and vegetables and this and that. But if I told you you could only eat that for 30 weeks, you'd probably go batshit crazy. Okay. Now, I'm being a little exaggerative here. Like I said, I was probably going to be doing in the beginning here, because it's not just chicken and vegetables, but you're eating essentially the same 5 to like, we're going to go real wild here and say like 8 foods. And these are the things that you consume for 30 weeks on end. And this is this tends to be, out of everyone that I ask, the hardest part of competing. And I've had plenty of girls like, oh, food's not a big deal to me. Well, it will be when for 30 weeks you're told that you can only eat these things, and anything else off this plan is not on plan, and therefore will throw off your prep, right? So it's the nature of, we want what we can't have. It's normal. It's a normal human reaction when you're told you can't have crumble cookies every Saturday as your usual like routine that you have with your kiddos, after soccer practice. Like, it's not happening. Like, you can get it for them, but you can't have it for you. And that's all good and fine for a little bit. And y'all who compete, you be knowing, right? You get to a certain point in prep and you're just like, I can't be around that food. I can't smell that food. Some people are kind of sick and twisted and they want to smell it. And some others are even more sick and twisted and they want to like bake and shit for other people. I don't recommend that. I actually think that that's playing with fire and too much temptation. But if you have iron will, you go for it. But you get to a certain point where your body is hungry, right? You are going to feel hungry. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you're not hungry during prep, again, you're a unicorn. And 2, you might not be in a true deficit, okay? Or, you might have a significant amount of body fat to lose and your body just hasn't came to that point yet where it's like poking at you for fuel, right? Because it's burned off all your body fat. So that's totally possible. But there is a certain point in prep, and I like to think it's generally the sweet spot is about around the 6 to 8 weeks out mark, where most of my clients, myself included, do not want to be at any functions or any stores where there's treats or sweets or anything that is just going to kind of pull you away. It's very, very challenging. So it's important that you know thyself before you try to embark on a competition, and your eating habits and your eating history. And if you have any history of eating disordered or body dysmorphia or anything like that, I highly, highly suggest against competing. Okay. People ask me all the time over on Instagram, or I'll get email inquiries like, do you work with people for competition who have a past history of eating disorder? No, I do not. Because I think that putting you into a competition prep, if you have a history of an eating disorder, is actually going to exacerbate and resurrect the problem. I've seen it happen time and time again. And there's probably some outliers out there that are going to be like, hey, you said this, but like, I've done it. Okay. You're an exception to the rule, because it's pretty fucking rare. Because bodybuilding, if you look up bodybuilding eating disorders or bodybuilding body dysmorphia, just Google it. You'll have a plethora of YouTube videos and blog posts and things of women discussing these things. Now, I feel like I've completely turned a corner with it, but I've also done this plenty of times to know the process and the ins and outs, and to understand what my brain is doing when I come out of a show, which is, trying to tell me that I'm not, because I'm not stage lean, then I'm a failure, or I can't stay lean post show. What's wrong with you? Right? Like, I did that probably like the first 5 or 6 shows. I don't know, I'm just guesstimating. And then after that, I was like, okay, I kind of get this now. Like, this is what's happening to me after every show. It's normal. Don't take it personal. Like, your body's just like, yo, bitch, you kind of drug me through the mud for 30 weeks. Like, what do you expect? And I just had a softer landing coming out of a show with knowing like I'm not supposed to be stage lean. I also don't want to eat my face off after a show because I know how uncomfortable it feels, like my digestion and all these things. You have to be in a really good spot with your mindset more than anything, but more specifically around food. Another dumb reason is that some people, number 4, neglect their overall health and well-being. So sometimes if you have some other health issues, right? Like I was talking about earlier with the body dysmorphia and eating disorder, these are already like pre-existing health conditions or past history of some disordered stuff. Dumb to just kind of dumb. Don't do it. Okay. I have seen some girls, not on my team, on other coaches' team, big coach teams, big name coaches, where they have worked with athletes who have come from an anorexic background and have worked with them and fed them into a bodybuilding show and into a competition. And they have reworked their mindset and things like that. But they were coming from very, very, very dangerously low levels of body fat and body weight, even for that matter. But again, it's not something that I recommend. I think you have to work with somebody who has experience with that. And I am just I'm not in the business of trying to go down a path with somebody who has struggled mentally with like body dysmorphia, body image, and severe eating disorders. It's like not my scope of practice, So it should be something that is a red flag for you if you're thinking about it. Like, ooh, I don't know. I've done this thing. Not to say you can never do it, but just know, boss bitch told you that bodybuilding, the hardest part is the diet. Okay. The exercise is the fun part. Okay. The next one is another dumb reason is if you're trying to kind of succumb to peer pressure, right? Like your friends are doing it. You have a group of friends maybe that competes. You have a partner that competes, something like that, where you're like, oh God, everybody's doing it. And they're telling me that I should do a show. Maybe I should do a show, right? You know what? I've been guilty of this too. I've been known to beeline it over to a client. And those of you that listen know who you are. If I say this to you, it's because I mean it, because I don't say it to everyone. So if I tell you, if I pull you aside or I'm like, when are you competing? It's because I see something in you that has the potential for that. So I never peer pressure anybody because everybody needs to come into that at their own, on their own and have to really want to do it for their own reasons. But I will peruse around the studio and right now, everybody is in like, goddess body project mode there. And I'm just like, I see a few girls that now they're feeling themselves because they've dropped 10, 15 pounds. And I'm like, are you sure you don't want to compete? Because you're like halfway there. So that's my form of peer pressure, but I like don't harp on them and all that. So it's definitely not a reason to compete, right? You want to compete based off of personal goals, your own desires, something that you have set as far as achieving in your life, but not because somebody else wants you to. All right. Another dumb thing that people do, number 6, is people do not realize they're going to be pushing their limits. So you ignore the fact that you're going to be pushing your limits on many realms. Okay. So you're going to be likely overtrained. You're going to be underfed. You're going to be likely doing a lot of cardio. You're susceptible to injuries, right? I mean, this goes with any sport. I personally think that bodybuilding is one of the safer injury-wise as far as sports go. I don't have a lot of clients that come to me with injuries. If they're like little tweaks here and there. It's like a little, like a low back tweak or like a knee thing or something like that. But there is that potential, right? Like muscle strains and things. I prepped an entire prep with a hamstring tear, or I should say super really bad strain. And then I've also prepped with a torn labrum and an impinged shoulder. So there's things that happen, right? And there's potential long-term damage from that. I was in the middle of prep to get my pro card, and my shoulders were just destroyed. I couldn't do anything. And so I knew I was in the middle of prep. And so what I was abusing was cortisone shots, right? Like, you're only supposed to get them so often because they start to wear down some of the tissues in there. And I was like, I don't care. I need to get to stage. I'm trying to get my pro card, and I just need to get through my workouts without being in pain. And I ended up creating more issues with my shoulder, and it's better now because I've had to do some work on it. But there's a lot of risks for long-term damage. The other potential things that you have to think about with dangers of bodybuilding is, it's not normal for us as females to get to these low levels of body fat. So a lot of times your periods get skewed, your female hormones get skewed, your thyroid hormone as well. And so there's a lot of health things that can potentially happen. Now, there are ways to mitigate that and preventative things, and the things that I do with my athletes. Things that I would recommend is, before you go into a prep, like, I won't even prep somebody if they're not getting their labs done. Like, I'm not even fucking with you. Like, come on, bro. Like, you need to be taking your health seriously. Your body is literally, this is all you got, right? And you're not just going to roll the dice and hope that your coach gives you the right training program, the right cardio, and the right supplements and the right diet for this to all work. No, you need to know what's happening with your hormones, because bodybuilding, whether you do PEDs or not, physique enhancing drugs or not, bodybuilding will affect your body in a not positive way. In some way, shape, or form, something ends up happening. Even with my natty of nattiest clients, okay, my most natural athletes, they've lost their periods. Their thyroid functions, isn't as optimal. Sometimes their liver function test is a little elevated. And like these things, the liver function and the period, 90% and 99% of the time will restore back to normal. The thyroid, not so much. So you have to be very aware that a lot of times these things happen. Again, there's some outliers. It's not everybody, but it's very, very rampant in the bodybuilding world for a reason, because this is not a healthy sport, right? No, once you get into, and this is the thing, like, I'm not bashing bodybuilding, you guys. I fucking love it. Like, I live for the shows, for my girls and my clients, and I love all the experiences that I had. But just like any upper level sports, right? Like the NFL, any of the bigger sports that you have these top athletes in, there's risk, right? Besides the physical risk that comes with that, there is also health risk. There are, unless they're a tested federation, steroids are rampant in pro sports everywhere, okay, that are not tested. And people are even doing them and getting around the tests too, because there's ways around that. So just know bodybuilding is an extreme sport once you decide to commit to it, because there's nothing normal about doing, some of my girls an hour and a half of cardio a day on top of an hour to an hour and a half of training, and then also being on like 1,000 calories, right? Like, at some point in prep, sometimes it'd be like that. And it's because we're trying to push to get ready, or, we had some days off plan and now we're trying to catch up and we're behind. And so you have to know that it's an extreme sport. So this is why I feel compelled to share these things. Okay. The other dumb reason is, if you're broke, like you can't, this is like a fucking expensive hobby, y'all. Okay. Even myself as an IFBB pro, like I don't make any money directly competing. You don't start to make money competing until you become a pro. And then you start competing as a pro at shows that actually award money to the first place winners. Right. And then that is even more unlikely, right? Like, getting your pro card and then winning your first pro show. Like that's probably pretty rare from what I know, unless you're Ashley Kaltwasser probably, but it's very, very rare. So you're not like shoveling in money. You don't get paid to compete. You don't win any cash to compete, at least in the NPC and the IFBB, as far as I know, unless you win a pro show or, sometimes they give checks to the top 3 or the top 5. It depends on the promoter. You're not really making big, big money unless you're winning big shows like the New York Pro, the Pittsburgh Pro, the Olympia, the Arnold, things like that. And at that point, you've been competing for a while. Likely you've won, a lot of shows. And so you should not go into bodybuilding or competing thinking that, it's cool because I'm just working out. Like, this is how expensive could this be? No. You have to think of all the expenses that come with bodybuilding, right? A gym membership, a personal trainer if you want to train properly, your supplements, your competition coach, your posing coach, your suit, you have your shoes, you have the tan, you have hair, makeup, registration for the show, your NPC card, the hotel room, all the things, all the registrations, all the fees, the tickets for the show if you have family or partners coming, your eyelashes, your nails, your toes, like all these things. It's thousands and thousands of dollars. I've probably spent just on competing alone 50 grand, not even lying, in 16 shows. I mean, probably pretty easy because you have to think, I've had coaches those whole times. I've had trainers those whole times. I've had posing coaches. I've had suits and tans and registrations and flights because I've flown to a lot of shows, hotel rooms, like all of that. It's fucking nuts. So you have to know that what you're getting into is very pricey if you want to do it properly, right? There's certain things you can cut corners on, and there's certain things that like you do not want to cut corners on, right? And as a coach, I can steer my clients in that direction, most definitely. But it is pricey, and you need to make sure that you're not putting yourself or your family in any kind of financial burden or pinch to compete, because it's not worth it. Okay. So the other dumb reason, and this could be controversial, okay, but you will be sacrificing enjoyment and balance. So just know that you aren't going to be having a whole lot of fun. You are going to have fun on a whole different level, but if you're a very social person and you like to go out and you like to do things and you like to get away for the weekends or do trips or do this or do that, or you're constantly traveling and gallivanting because you love, your life, it's going to change. Okay. When you focus on a bodybuilding show, so it's hard for me because I'm completely content just being a homebody, right? Like just as of late, I'm traveling a lot more and I'm like doing more things since I'm not competing, and I'm really, really enjoying it. But I never was before. So it was hard for me because I didn't really have anything that I felt was like taken away from me, right? When I started competing, I was like, great, I don't have to talk to people. Wonderful. Like, I'm just going to eat, train, sleep, repeat. Like, that's all I need to do. Perfect. So I was essentially a teensy bit of a bodybuilding robot for the better part of a decade. Now that I'm like enjoying life and I'm going out and I'm going to restaurants and I'm hanging out with my friends and I have these little getaways and I'm traveling out of the country, like all this stuff, I can't imagine now having to stop doing this and just go into hermit mode and compete. And some people can balance out a social life and competing eloquently. I see others that are terrible at it and they think they're doing great and their preps are suffering. And I've tried to do it myself. I was dating in, one of my preps, and it was like, yeah, well, unless we want to stay home and like I can eat my meal prep, I really can't do much unless you want to like go for a walk at the park. And you can make make things creative and do things and like have fun to the best that you possibly can in a prep. But I'm going to tell you that if you really enjoy being social, getting out, traveling and doing all those things, it's going to be very important for you to be focused if you want to be successful. And a lot of times those things will pull you from your focus. And also too, and it's not necessarily just the environment, it's also your energy meter, right? Like how much bandwidth do you have to go to a concert, right? When you're 6 weeks out from a show, or, go to your bestie's bachelorette party and she's having it at a wine tasting event and they're like, you know, gonna go do like watch movies and fucking I don't know what people do for bachelorette parties anymore, but but like how enjoyable is that gonna be for you when you're like, I can't have wine, I can't have any of the charcuterie board, I can't go watch a movie and eat popcorn and snacks with y'all. So I'm gonna come, but I'm gonna bring my food. And I hear girls do that all the time. I'm like, that's great and everything, but I've done that before. Y'all, like I had 3 kids in sports and I was constantly traveling. Like Alicia was in competitive cheerleading. And so we were always all over the place with her. And I made it happen, but I was like the odd man out. I didn't do any of the the parental stuff that they had or the extracurricular stuff for the parents, or really talk to any of the parents, if I'm being honest, because I was always like, I had my lunch bag, I had my foods, and I was always like, oh, nope, I'm going to eat my next meal. And then I'm like hammering through pieces of gum after gum after gum just to get through the day to get home so I don't have to think about all the food that was around me. So it becomes a very hyper-focused food. I can't have that hyper-focused. I can't drink alcohol, that kind of a thing. So it is sacrificing definitely social aspect of being a human. The other reason not to do it is because it is not sustainable long term. And if you think that it is, that's a reason why you shouldn't, right? Like if you think that you're going to be stage lean and look like how you do on stage, that's a dumb reason to compete because it's not true. Like most people do not. The ones that do are generally the pros that compete very competitively to try to get to the Olympia. So they're competing for points and they're trying to accumulate those throughout the year. And so they are basically show ready all the time, right? There's your favorite, Instagram IFBB pros that do that, but that's not the majority, right? Like most of you listening are probably NPC amateur, probably have a few IFBB pros here that listen as well, but it's not sustainable. So I have people that think that they're going to get in that shape and then stay in that shape. And it's like, consider what that would do to you long term and that it's totally unrealistic and you would like want to stab yourself in the face. So that is the other thing is like being very clear to people that the stage look is again, very, very temporary. And it's more important for us as athletes or competitors or previous competitors to adopt a sustainable fitness practice and lifestyle and eating choices that you can maintain without going insane. That's the reality of it right now, right? And I feel like I've finally settled into that. I see my clients do it post show. I help kind of guide them out of it. Like, okay, let's cut your training back. We're going to cut your cardio back. Let's change your food up, and there's a plan to come out of it. And then you settle into a sweet spot, which is, okay, am I competing again? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, when? Is it within 6 months or is it over 6 months? Okay. And then from there, as a coach, I decide where should our body fat or scale weight be depending on what your answer is. If you want to compete in 6 months, we're probably not going to get too far off our current body weight and based off of some percentages. If we have more time, we have a little more wiggle room. We're going to take some time to grow and things like that. We can allow the scale to come up a tiny bit more. So that way your next preps are not fucking terrible. Okay. So that's the most important piece of coming out of a show is knowing that you have to find a sustainable balance of like, okay, I can't keep up with this 90 minutes of cardio a day and 90 minutes training. And granted, that's what got you that body, but you should not be anchored to that physique being your new normal, right? It's okay to feel like, okay, I worked hard for this and proud of it, but also know that it's specifically for that person, for that moment. It's specifically for that moment. It is not intended for you to continue to carry on through life like that, okay? And the last but not least, and probably one of the more important ones is a dumb reason is that people undermine the body positivity and self-acceptance goes really, really down the shitter when you compete a lot of times. Some people be living their best lives and like love themselves to death when they're competing, right? Because they're like, my God, my body's never looked like this. This is amazing. Now, I'll say that mostly happens to my first time competitors. Then when it comes time to compete for round two, they've spent some time on social media. They got to know some people backstage. Maybe they have some other people on the team that they got close with that have been doing it longer. And now they start this negative self-talk, oh God, I'm not good enough. I shouldn't compete. I don't look like this girl. I'll never look like that girl. Obsessing over people on Instagram. You have to know that everybody was a beginner once. Repeat that, Diane. Yes, ma'am. Everybody was a beginner once. And even those of us that are not beginners anymore still battle this to some degree, right? Like I still battle this, every time I go to a bodybuilding show, I get a little bit of FOMO because I see other people who competed either with me, alongside me, around the same time as me, who are maybe still competing. And, there's been times where I'm like, man, they look really good. And, I start to talk down on myself. And then I realize, fuck that. Like, I did that shit. I did it well. I'm very proud of it. And it was wonderful for what it was. It taught me a lot. And also, I'm still a perfectly amazing, fabulous fucking human without having to go on stage. And I'm going to own that, right? I'm not going to be self-conscious. I'm not going to only post my body when I'm shredded. Like I see people do that all the time. They compete and then they go radio silent, right? They stop posting altogether. They stop posting their bodies. They stop posting selfies, all that. Like I feel like I did that probably early on. But now I'm like, no, that's doing a total disservice to my following, my bitches, my fam, you guys, for you to think like this bitch has no cellulite. She doesn't have any rolls. She doesn't have a time where she's looking a little fluffier. Like that's a normal body, ebbs and flows, right? And especially with doing something as extreme as a bodybuilding competition, I'm never going to be that weight walking around. Why would I think that that's okay? And I'm going to belittle myself and beat myself up over it because it's not a fair comparison and it's just not realistic. So that, you guys, that was a rant on a lot of reasons that you should not compete in a bodybuilding show because this is something you need to think about. You need to think long and hard about. I know that a lot of people have resistance towards journaling. I would highly recommend you journal about why do I want to compete? What does that look like? Do I have the budget? What is my mind like? Do I have a healthy mindset around my body, around food? Who is this going to directly affect? Who do I need to talk to about competing that will be affected by this decision? So this is one that I usually tell my girls when they decide to compete is if you have a partner, you need to talk to your partner. You need to tell your partner this is your goal. Are they going to support you? It is very hard to compete when you do not have the support of your significant other. Let me tell you that right now. Okay. It is a huge challenge. I see women up against it all the time. Their partners do not agree with it. They do not support it. They're not interested in it. They talk shit about it. They give them shit about it. And it makes for a very, very rough prep and oftentimes a lot of divorce. Okay. Because it's almost like this is the one thing that's like the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of women, at least in my experience, where they're maybe already kind of unhappy in a relationship and then they decide they want to do this thing and feel good about themselves. And then their partner does not like that. There's tension, there's friction. All of a sudden, said competitor is feeling herself and getting all the compliments in the world and then decides, I don't need you anymore, buddy. So FYI, that happens a lot. Okay. So you need to be very, very aware of all the things. I love the journey. I wouldn't take it back for anything in the world. I think, of course there's things that I would have done differently, but it made me who I am. And you know what? It got me to this spot where I'm recording a podcast and like, at this point, almost 400,000 people have listened to it, which is fucking bananas. And I'm very pleased that my journey has given me enough experience and content and humor to share with you guys, because it's been a fucking crazy ride, y'all. But yo, Boss Bitch Radio, I love you. Boss Bitch Radio fans, I love y'all. If you are still like, you didn't scare me and I want to compete, we are going to be opening up the Goddess Body Elite team, and it's going to be by application only, and it's going to be done through physique assessments. So if you are interested in possibly getting on the team, I will say we are looking for girls that are interested in competing likely in 2024, because like I said, we have a pretty in-depth process. We want to make sure that you're prepared, you're ready, you have the right base of muscle. Now, there might be some outliers. So if you think you don't need to wait till 2023 or 2024, if you've already competed, great, submit a physique assessment. Let me know what your goals are. Be very specific with that. And then I can map that out for you in terms of a time frame, and let you know exactly what your options are. So hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one. Boss Bitch. Thank you for listening to Boss Bitch Radio. It would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the podcast. If you could give us a 5-star review on iTunes, drop us a little comment. We will read those, and we offer prizes as a ethical bribe for you to leave us some great mojo and words of affirmation. You know, that is my love language. And also, if you're over on Spotify, you can rate and review it there as well. All of this helps other women, other people, other folks see us, hear us, and learn from all of the amazing Boss Bitch tools and hacks, and hopefully get some LOLs. And if not, if anything, if you could share this with one person, I'd love you forever. And I know you are just here for my undying love. And last but not least, please, 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 please come find me over on Instagram so we can be buddies. We can be Insta fam over there. I am Diane Flores _IFBB_pro. Come say hi, drop me a DM, let me know what you think of the podcast. I'm always open for new suggestions and feedback as well. And I hope you listen again soon.